Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud, and I interview industry changers from across the globe about their past, present, and futures in business, innovation, and life. I enjoy helping people build their portfolios and bring out the authenticity of their business. Let's get started with today's guest. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. We have a very special guest here for the show today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for having me on your show again. I'm author William R. Douglas. I live northwest of Chicago, Illinois, about an hour northwest. And I've just come out with my second novel just this past July, The Sum of All Our Anger, Civil War 2.0.
You have to tell me the past leading up into the present of you writing that book, though. It's been a minute since you've been on.
Yep.
Yeah.
The premise of the book, it takes place in the future, about 37 years from now, and an openly Marxist leading president takes the oath of office and wants to basically dismantle our constitutional republic and rebuild the country as some kind of a Marxist utopia, and very much basically just wants to start over. Of course, there's a large segment of the country that doesn't agree with this, and the tension builds and culminates in a second civil war on American soil. And that's the gist of the story.
Basically, it's like a what if. What if this happened this way 37 years later?
Yeah, it basically takes all the political tension that we have today and projects it out 37 years, and what could happen unless something comes along to intercept the trajectory that our country is currently on. So
Now, for instance, some people don't even know what Marxist is because we have been bound to not learning about politics, everything but politics. So tell me, what is Marxist?
Yeah, so Karl Marx is considered the author of communism. His books in the late 19th century became the rage in many corners of the world, particularly in Europe and particularly in Russia at the time, which was run by the czars at the time that he had wrote those books, and his books about communism, the theory of communism, and his hatred of capitalism really became the genesis for the Russian Revolution in 1917.
Oh,
and so
wow.
project that forward in the 20th century, in the middle and the later part of the 20th century, of course, and on in the 21st century, the idea of communism still lives and is still practiced, in Cuba and also in China and other parts of the world like Venezuela. And there are fairly large numbers of Americans, particularly on college campuses, that have an interest in Marxism / socialism, and they think that it might be a better solution than the current one that we've been having here in America since the country's founding.
Wow, you've done your research on this. Like, seriously, what made you get up every day to write this book about Marxism? Karl
Well,
Marx or whatever.
yeah. So as the social and political tension began to build here over the last several years, and I have 6 kids, 8 grandkids, and I became increasingly concerned for the future of the nation and whether or not our nation was going to survive, and as a constitutional republic. And I really felt compelled that I need to write this story. My first book, The Death and Resurrection of Baseball, which came out in 2022. It had as a backdrop in that story. In the book, it was 100 years in the past. A second civil war had been like the proverbial nail in the coffin to kill the sport of baseball. And this 12-year-old boy becomes involved in rediscovering the sport. And I was being interviewed on a lot of shows about the first book, and a lot of the hosts were asking me, "Are you going to write about the Civil War that's in this book?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm not sure I want to do that because it's not something I hope that it would ever happen, much less try to write about it. Because obviously, a second Civil War on American soil with our modern weapons would be horrific. That's an understatement. But as like I say, as things began to deteriorate in America socially and politically, I became increasingly concerned, and I realized about a year and a half ago that I need to try and tackle this project and try to write a novel that would be very very clear to the reader, no matter their political persuasions, that what is at stake as far as the future of our country.
Do you think we're headed um to that type of situation where your book is involved partially in the next 10 to 20 years or
You
no?
know, it's hard to say. I want to say no. I hope no. Um, Obviously, we just had an election last week, and a fair number of people are not happy with the outcome, and a fair number of people are happy with the outcome. Um, I was kind of wondering if a certain candidate won, what would be the reaction out on the streets, and so far it's been kind of quiet. I know there's been a lot of introspection, hand wringing, whatever you want to call it, by a fairly large part of the country, while a fairly large part of the country has been celebrating the election. So, but I am encouraged that it's been quiet. Um, in the long term, though, and really, my book was not. I didn't write my book, thinking about what could happen in 2024. I mean, really, the book was a look from a macro perspective, what can happen, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, if we as Americans, regardless of our political affiliations, if we don't relearn the art of agreeing to disagree and still be family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, politicians, etc. And I think that's so important, and I think it's one of the lessons of the book is what happens when we're so encamped in our various ideologies that we no longer want to talk with anyone that is of the opposite ideology, and how dangerous that can become, unless something, like I said, something comes along to change that dynamic and get us back to a point where, again, I use this term a lot in these interviews, but agree to disagree and still be all the above: family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, etc.
So you basically tackled this, and how long did it take you as a whole to tackle this the Civil War 2.0?
Yeah, I will be honest. I mean, even though I wrote the book uh, with a scenario taking place starting in the year 2061, specifically January, after the inauguration of this president, this fictional character, I did that purposely. But I did, when I began to write this in the summer of 2023, I had some serious concerns about, the election coming up in 2024. And so I was very, very determined to keep at it, keep getting the story down, and then getting the story out, published before the election. So, thankfully, I was able to get the book out there in July of this past year.
Okay. Okay. And you know, the Civil War, you're talking about basically the Civil War, 37 years where people within America is fighting each other. That's
Yeah.
both military and not military, or
Yes. I'm a fan of history. With a focus on World War II history as well as the Civil War of the 1860s, and particularly in the Civil War of the 1860s, after the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln, there was a moment in the country where it didn't matter who you were, you had to choose sides. There was nothing left to do except to choose sides. Unfortunately, because the politicians weren't able to resolve the issue of chattel slavery, and so in that era, that's exactly what happened in the military. There were generals on down that had to decide where their loyalties were. Of course, a fair number retained their loyalty to the Union and to the idea that all men should be free. When I say men, of course, I mean men and women. And that, unfortunately, there were a fair number of generals on down that said, no, our loyalty is to Virginia, our loyalty is to the South, our loyalty is to this new country we want to create called the Confederate States of America. Of course, the most notable one who chose sides, the wrong side, was, of course, Robert E. Lee. And so there's this part of the book, in my book, where something similar happens, where people have to choose sides, no matter how great or how small. People have to determine, okay, do I really think that the country should be torn down and started over as a communist state? Then, I have to pick this side if I believe that. Or if I believe that uh, our constitutional republic is still worth preserving, protecting, defending. Therefore, I will I will choose this side. And so you see that play out in the story in a very key chapter where that has to happen because uh, the the uh, the two sides are so far apart and they're unable to come to any sort of compromise, and then the fighting starts. Unfortunately,
can you tell me some? I probably am rewording the last question, but tell me about some highlights that you you have from the book that relates to anything that's possibly happened that you know switched around and changed up a bit to make different, so you won't, it won't be a um because it's a nonfiction book, so it will be possibly.
no, it is fiction. Yeah, it is
Oh,
fiction. It's fiction.
okay.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So some key characters, obviously, the main, from my perspective, antagonist is President Devin Cyrus, who's a hardcore Marxist and has this policy called the New Way, and the New Way believes in tearing down the republic and getting rid of the Constitution and embracing a fully communist system here on American soil. And his hatred of all things that remind him of America's past is played out in the story. So one of the first things he does is he orders a replacement of the American flag, and he has a new flag designed that totally replaces our current flag because he believes that the current flag is a symbol of oppression and white supremacy, um, and therefore he wants to pitch it all and unveil this new flag, which he does in the story on Inauguration Day, and there's that really uh, kind of a this major moment when the reality of what he's been campaigning about really comes home and
But
hit
can a
home.
president really do that?
Well, he uses an executive order to do it.
Oh
So
wow.
we see, of course, we see both sides using executive order to get things done. Some things we may like, and some things we may not like. So, but that's how he does it. And it sets off a chain of events on that day uh, that unfortunately leads to open conflict. Uh,
What is the person going to get out of reading this book? Obviously you sound like it's a lot. It's a lot that they're going to get out of it, but in your own words, what would they get out of this book?
well, I wrote the book with three goals in mind. The first goal would be that it would serve as a warning, again, no matter your political or ideology bent, a warning that we need to all take a step back, learn to dialogue better, listen better, and when the conversation is over, again, remain family, friends, coworkers, etc. Uh, Point two was to um, really remind people of the fragility of our constitutional republic, and not to just assume it's always going to be there. It's something that does have to be. Uh, we have to collectively, as a people, as a free people, be on the ramparts and watching that we do collectively as a people endeavor to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution. And then the third goal really would, and this is it's in there. It's very subtle, but it is in there. Is to point people back to God, because I think that many, many, many Americans have forsaken God, and I think that um, a nation without that spiritual component of a relationship with God and what He's done for our country. Um, when you put that aside, uh, it just, in my view, invites all manner of problems. So, in fact, one of the heroes of my book is is a black minister, a moderate Democrat, and he's a bishop over at AME Church here in my hometown. Fictional character, obviously, because it's 37 years in the future. But that faith element is very important to me personally, and it is in there in the story. In the overall story, it's not proselytizing. It's not in your face. It's a subtle stream that you see in there popping up in different places that hopefully will get the reader to take a step back and ponder the question. So
Yeah. Um and where are you going in the future? And we're going to talk briefly about the other book that you had that me and you and I talked about before. But where are you going in the future with your book? Do you plan on writing more books? What?
yeah, so I'm retiring in 12 days. Can you believe it? Thank
Congratulations.
you. So yeah, I can't wait to be retired. But yeah, I love to write, and I definitely see myself writing some more books. One book I'm considering writing is a story about some very good friends of mine. Their son was tragically killed a couple years ago by a drunk driver, and so I'm thinking about writing a book about their son. Um, and another book would be another fiction book about baseball. Uh, so I got a couple of things in mind, but right now I'm focused on promoting this book because I really think there's some really good lessons in here for America if they should happen to pick up a copy and uh, and read this story, this fictional story of a second civil war that I pray never happens.
Yeah, me either. I hope it never happens.
Yeah.
And if you had to give a piece of advice to the young entrepreneur out there that want to be a writer and want to be out there with authenticity and have people know, what's going on in their world, what would it be? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
m- sure. Yeah, great question. My reply would be just sit down and start writing. I know that, you know, when people want to take on a new endeavor, of course, the because of the wonder of the internet, people are going to want to hop on the internet and look at YouTube and everything else and do all kinds of research, which is fine. But don't let what you read delay you from just being bold and taking a step forward and sit down and start writing the story that you want to write. Or if it's nonfiction, sit down and just start writing. And certainly you can go along and get help, for all the things you need to do to get a book uh, in print, all the editing and proofreading and all that stuff. But while the idea is fresh in your mind, it's okay. Just sit down and start writing what you want to write.
Can you name the title of your other book that we both did an interview about? And can you tell me why the readers would want to read this book? And can you also tell me basically just why the readers want to read your book?
Sure. Yeah, my first book, which was recognized by a couple of book awards, is called The Death and Resurrection of Baseball: Echoes from a Distant Past. It's a feel good book. The protagonist is a 12-year-old boy by the name of Joe Scott, and him and his buddies go walking in the woods one day in a place that formerly was a battlefield in this Second Civil War. Um, and it's 100 years after the war has been over. And so, one thing that happened in the war is that baseball has died as a sport. And so, young Joe Scott and his buddies, they go walking in the woods and they find this relic, and he's not sure what it means. He finds a sign that has a tie back to baseball, but he doesn't know it because there's no one alive that has any memory or recollection of the game of baseball because it's been extinct for over 100 years.
Wow.
So he gets involved with, basically, he becomes the conduit of rediscovering this sport and reintroducing it to America. And it's a great story. It's been very, very well received. Like I say, it won a couple of, was recognized by a couple of book award contests. Not first place, but it was recognized as a finalist in a couple of book award contests that were very notable contests. So,
Do
and
you remember do you remember the year that you say that they stopped playing baseball and then came out with 100 years later,
yeah,
someone who
so
found it.
great question. So in the baseball book, uh, it starts in the year 2166. So like
Okay.
130 plus years from now. That's when the baseball book starts. The war, even in the baseball book, the war starts in 2061. And so the new novel is kind of a loosely tied prequel to the baseball book because the war starts in 2061 in both stories. But
Oh, get out of here.
the baseball book really is a feel good story. A lot of people use the word hope when they read the baseball book, and got a lot of really good favorable reviews, and people really like it. Really like it.
Okay. And we're crunched for time, so tell me, what was one of the factors in your past that did you know in your past that you would be doing writing books for the future?
I've always had a love of writing. I've been told by people that I had a gift for writing, but I never sat down and really tried to write a book in my younger days. Finally, I had this idea come in my mind about the baseball story. Some of it was based on an article that I had read many years ago about games that kids used to play before the first Civil War, and those games are extinct, and no one even knows the names of the games, much less how to play them. And so I got this idea about what would happen if a major sport died, you know. And so, being a baseball fan, I immediately gravitated. Well, what would happen if baseball died, you know? And so in 2016, I'm like, you know what? I think I got a story here. I've always wanted to write a book, and kind of tied into your other question about what motivating people. I just decided to sit down and just start writing. So I just sat down and started writing the story, and it took a couple of years actually. There were a lot of life things going on, and I had the proverbial writer's block writing that first book. And
Yeah,
I went out to Iowa to the Field of Dreams movie site out in Dyersville, Iowa, and got re-inspired and then really picked up the pace in getting the baseball book done and published.
great. And what would you have to say to your readers who want to know how they can reach you?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thanks to all your listeners for watching your show today. I'm glad that again I've had this opportunity to come on your show, Kimberly. It's a fun time. But I have an author, WilliamRDouglas.com website. Again, that's author, WilliamRDouglas.com. And from there, you can branch out into my social media. There's links to where you can get the book on Amazon and Apple, and also Barnes and Noble online. And gosh, I would just welcome and invite your listeners to go out and explore my two books, and maybe they'll pick one of them up or both of them up, and that would be great.
Well, thank you so much for joining my show. Stay on the line. Thank you, everybody, for joining my show. Take care, and I'll see you next Friday.
Thank you. Bye bye.